In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. Before I get into this review, which is going to be quite the review, I wanted to shout out the Soulless Trenchcoat because he does these really fun, sort of fan-made music videos using songs that he really likes and clips from movies that he thinks correspond well to each other, and he makes these really fun music videos. So I had an idea for a video, which he ended up making, which was syncing up clips from slasher movies with the song We Are Murderers by Xandria, who are an awesome symphonic metal band, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. It's a lot of fun, and I think it deserves to be checked out, so I'm gonna link that below, because Trenchy is just awesome anyway. Today I'm going to be reviewing, as you probably know, Bigfoot Blood Trap. This movie is a raw and extreme release from Wild Eye Films. Coincidentally, this past week leading up to the Saturday on which I'm filming this was Wild Eye Week, I believe. A bunch of horror YouTubers who you're probably familiar with did a bunch of reviews of Wild Eye Films. I just wanted to get this movie out of the way, but coincidentally it ended up sort of being a little button on the end of Wild Eye Week in its own way. I don't think this is a good note to end on, frankly. I think you should check out their reviews. So I'm going to link to promo video for this past Wild Eye Week that features a lot of the YouTubers that participated, so please check that out and check out a lot of the reviews because I think those movies deserve to be looked at. And in regards to this movie, I'm not entirely sure what year it came out. The internet says 2017. The disc in here says copyright 2018, and the case says copyright 2019. So my guess is it was initially put out independently sometime in 2017, while I picked it up in 2018 and actually put it out in 2019. I don't know for sure, but that's my guess. And this movie follows this woman who inherits this property from her now dead terrible human being of a grandfather, and she goes onto the land hunting with her family and some friends. They come upon Bigfoot, who after brutally killing someone, they manage to capture him and bring him back. And shortly after that, they come in contact with a scientist named Dr. Corman. He wants to study Bigfoot and to mate Bigfoot with human women to prove somehow through this that Bigfoot is the missing link between humans and primates, or that he has the genes of the missing link somehow. This film was given to me by Evil Stevel, who hated it so much that he did a rant on the film. It was originally given to Evil Stevel by Dave Maggot, who also hated the film. So it is a very well-hated Wild Eye movie, and I understand why. I don't think I completely hated it as much as they did. I don't want to watch it again, but I think there were elements that had some kind of potential and were kind of fun, but ultimately it kind of falls apart. I think the music in this movie is probably its strongest point. The movie opens with some campy punk rock, which is actually really fun. I believe it says the song is by The Accelerators. They also list some other artists at the end of the movie, so I don't know who wrote that particular song. I swear I've heard it before outside of this movie though, so I might just be going crazy because I listen to way too much music, but I swear I've heard that song somewhere else before. I thought that the punk music, like the two punk hard rock songs that get used in this film, were actually really fun. The score itself is nothing too crazy. It's decently scored, I think, but not especially memorable. There's not really any specific elements to talk about. There's a little bit of a tribal thing going on because apes, I guess. Otherwise, it just sounds like your traditional film score. The one thing of note is that this was done by Richard Band, who is Charles Band's brother, who I've talked about before. He scored Mutant, which I reviewed, and he's also scored the likes of Reanimator. That music is decent, the punk music is fun, and then we also get, at one point, a little musical number. There's a Christmas musical number. There's a Christmas scene that comes out of nowhere with a bunch of the characters just randomly singing Oh Holy Night. Their singing voices are terrible. They've got completely different music playing in the backgrounds. Our main character is visibly annoyed by all of this, and Dr. Corman just has tears streaming down his face at how beautiful it is. And that might be my favorite scene in the movie, because it comes out of nowhere, it has no place in the film, and you can tell how much fun they were having doing just such a beautifully, gloriously stupid scene. I love it. And there is a later scene in the film where there's this little ukulele love song for Bigfoot and his mate, which would be fun and campy if the actual scene which is played over wasn't so disturbing in concept. That's my biggest problem with this movie, is it tries to be campy and fun, but the premise it's based on is so not okay that the few fun elements it does have kind of fall flat because this movie just has no idea what it wants to be. Actually, I feel like it wants to be a fun, campy horror movie, but also a really raunchy exploitation film, but it can't reconcile them in a way that works. It's hard to laugh and enjoy yourself when you're so visibly disgusted by everything. The movie opens with these titles that are like, this is based on a true story. Judge for yourself whether or not this is real. And it's like, obviously this is not based on a true story because of how utterly ridiculous it gets. And if it is, I am thoroughly disappointed in this Earth and everybody on it, because why? Just know, nothing like what happens in this film should ever happen on this planet, ever. I'm disappointed in you. That brings me to the really serious part of this review, which is my biggest problem of the film, which is that they bring in these really messed up real life aspects into the story, which are kind of throwaway but really uncalled for, and they have no place in this campy horror film. They bring up at one point that sort of these experiments have their origin with stuff Stalin was doing, which is not okay at all. If you're going to make a campy horror film, don't bring these real life atrocities into your movie, because that is just, no. It's one thing to make a artistic, I guess tastefully made, although that's horror film that is actually addressing real life messed up things in a way that is meaningful. But if you're just throwing these elements into this exploitation film for shock value, which for one thing, it's not shocking to this audience that's used to watching raw and extreme underground horror films, I'd expect, but it's also just in really bad taste. It adds nothing to your film, and it's just disappointing and distasteful and disgusting, frankly. There's nothing enjoyable or meaningful about that. It's actually awful, and I despise it. And the same thing goes for the later stuff, where there is a point where they had the potential to make it kind of funny and campy, but just based on what their premise is, it's not funny. It's not to say that there aren't horror movies out there that I like that are in bad taste, because there are, but there are just some things that you don't play for laughs, and this movie crosses a line that it shouldn't with the whole mating aspect of the film, because there's this whole setup with, like, we're going to create a dating profile for Bigfoot, which on the one hand is kind of really funny, but on the other hand, there is this whole sort of really rapey aspect to the movie that is not funny. You don't play that for laughs, ever. It's just not enjoyable to watch. There were like a few moments in this movie that brought a smile to my face just because of the cheesiness and the overacting, but otherwise I just kind of felt like I needed to take a shower after I finished this film. I'm just very disappointed in you right now. I feel like the filmmakers for this have potential, but I'm mostly disappointed in them. The dialogue, again, is kind of garbage. There are a few kind of funny one-liners in places, which are mostly funny because of some of the over-the-top delivery, but the dialogue in this film feels very wooden and by the numbers, like B-movie stuff, which is kind of the intent, I guess. They're trying to make a campy B-movie here, but I feel like the dialogue needed to be a little bit weirder and more colorful and fun, because it just feels by the books and not funny. For example, look at a film like, say, The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, which is a very low-budget movie and a ridiculous pastiche of Ed Wood and Roger Corman style B-movies. The dialogue of that is a total caricature of what you would hear in those movies, and nobody in those films talks like a real person. This movie feels like they're stuck just trying to copy what cheesy B-movies have done before and not really having fun with it. There are these occasional moments where they do, but ultimately the dialogue just feels kind of wooden and bland. The other big flaw is the pacing of the film. Again, this might have been decent if it was not as mean-spirited as it is. They don't need to make it less of an exploitation film, I guess. They could still be very gory and raunchy about it, but they bring in these sort of awful real-life elements into the film that don't have any place in this film, and it just has this very mean-spirited feeling to it. The film runs like an hour and 35 minutes, and it's really overstaying the small welcome that it does have. If you condense this film and did some rewrites of the script, it might be enjoyable, but it kind of drags to the point where I just kind of felt numb and a little bit like I needed a shower after I finished the movie, which I did, and I'm still just kind of in this zone of what did I just watch, and trying to be fair about this review, but also just feeling kind of numb and feeling like I need to watch something else. Visually, there's not much to say about the movie. It feels like it was just shot on somebody's phone, even though some of the quality is a little bit better than probably a camera phone. It does feel like it was shot on somebody's phone. I can't decide if I like that or not, because in some ways it reminds me of the low-budget horror movies I just make with my friends, because I like that very handmade quality that the movie has, actually. The sets and the costumes feel very homemade, because it's mostly just people's clothes and their actual houses, plus these random woods that they're filming in. Dr. Corman's costume is a little bit more elaborate. There's someone who has a very bad wig. None of that really bothered me. It's just kind of what it is. The low budget is not the problem with this film. It's very low budget and trashy looking, but I can actually get behind that and have some fun with that. The acting style in this movie is hit or miss. It's very back and forth, because there is insanely over-the-top acting with a lot of the actors, particularly in their death scenes, which are fun when it's not the victims of Bigfoot that have been captured through the dating site, because I'm just sitting there like, why are you doing this in those scenes? There are a few scenes earlier on in the film where people are dying and screaming and they're covered in blood, and it's actually very sort of trauma-esque and over-the-top and fun. But otherwise, the acting from most of the actors is very flat and bland and wooden and B-movie-ish in a not so great way. And that carries over to most of the main characters as well. They're not likable. They're not likable at all. Everybody in this film is basically in it for the money. The acting doesn't feel terribly professional in this movie, but I don't want to completely knock the actors. I feel like they're trying based on what they've been given, but they're hampered by this really wooden dialogue and this general lack of interesting character traits. They give some kind of interesting stuff to the younger brother of our lead actress. Dr. Corman is very over the top, but otherwise, none of these characters are really memorable. They don't really have memorable traits to them. I did really like Dr. Corman. I forget the actor who's playing him, but he was actually very enjoyable in this film. Granted, it was hard to have fun, again, because of the awful stuff that he's doing, but he's clearly delighting in being this hammy villain character who's got this very theatrical voice He says humans as humans, and he always talks with this very bland but still somehow over-the-top theatrical Rod Serling voice. And it does kind of get grating by the end of the movie, but that's just kind of everything in the movie. He has some really funny moments. Again, there are scenes where he's crying tears of joy, and he's overacting his total elation at his little successes and things. There's a scene where he's taking selfies, and it's really, really messed up, but I was still enjoying just watching him pull all of these faces in front of the camera. Once again, the younger brother kind of has a thing going where he's clearly meant to be this sort of younger child character, but is being played by a much older actor, because he's always like playing Mousetrap or playing with like stuffed animals or something like that in the film. And I've got to wonder about some copyright stuff in this film, because he's legitimately playing a on-brand game of Mousetrap. And there's another scene later on where just in the background, Dr. Corman's assistant is reading this little Disney golden book of the Three Little Pigs and sort of crying to himself as he reads it, which was actually really funny. I'm sure they didn't have the rights to either of those things, so I gotta wonder how they managed to get them into the film. But again, this movie was so indie and low budget, they were probably like, you know, these companies aren't even gonna bother to look at these things anyway, so what the hell. There was like maybe one likable character in the film, being one of the victims of Bigfoot, because she was clearly this total horror nerd. She was talking about different vampire and werewolf and zombie themed like bars and restaurants and things. She actually got really excited when she saw Dr. Corman, because she was fascinated with all the sort of cryptozoology, Bigfoot type stuff, and then they just kind of killed her off. She was the only character who I could relate to in any way, and I was really grasping at straws at that point, because all of the characters in this movie are really flat and really terrible people, except for her. She's really flat. She's just actually a decent human being. The effects in the film are, again, they're not good. They're very badly done, but that didn't bother me. I kind of enjoyed the very fake looking gore. It was very clear that when someone's flesh was being torn into, all that was really happening was just kind of this Bigfoot hands flailing in front of them while blood was being poured onto their skin, and then they would show like just blood and guts later. The fake looking gore was kind of fun, but it got kind of boring after a while because they didn't really do much that was creative with it. I think my favorite moment in the film is there's a scene where someone's fingers get bitten off and blood is spurting everywhere, and it's kind of a fun practical effect. I commend them to trying to do practical effects for this movie. I just wish they had put a little bit more effort into it. Bigfoot looks like a guy in a gorilla suit, and I don't even care. That's kind of what I'm used to with a lot of the like 1940s gorilla movies that I watch. We also see baby Bigfoot earlier on in the film, and I don't even know with that. It's clearly just a smaller guy in a gorilla suit, but you can see his face through the gorilla suit, so it's a really weird look, and I don't even know. It's just, what is this movie? I've kind of trashed this film, and I think justifiably so given a lot of the subject matter, but I don't out and out hate everything about the movie, and I don't hate the filmmakers. I'm going to watch the special features for this film before I end up sending it to the next unlucky recipient who has to review this film, because yes, that's the thing. There is a Bigfoot blood trap curse going around. This has gone from Dave Maggot to Evil Stevel to me, and will now be going to someone else. I think these filmmakers have some potential to make some kind of a low-budget, fun, campy horror film in the future, but they get too bogged down in trying to make it nasty and uncomfortable and exploitative, which they succeed in, but that hinders the fun element of the movie, so that it's not really an enjoyable film to watch. It has fun, campy moments, but they are hindered by the everything else of the film. I don't really ever want to watch this movie again. I don't highly recommend it unless you just want to say, I've survived Bigfoot blood trap. I think these filmmakers do have some potential, but I think they need to come up with a better story, because there was no point to this story I don't think it was a story that needed to be told. It probably was a labor of love on some level, but it's just so mean-spirited that it's hard to feel that. I think that you should check out Wild Eye for fun and well-made horror movies. Maybe these folks have made other horror films that I haven't seen that are better than this one. I think they should keep at it and improve from what they've got here, because again, it's not an out-and-out bad film. It's just really hindered by a lot of bad elements. I'm going to link Wild Eye Releasing below as well. They've made some good horror movies that I've seen. The Velocipaster is probably their most popular, which is a great example of a really fun, campy horror film. Another one of my favorites is Bundy Reborn, which is a re-released version of The Inflicted, which I reviewed a while back, which is a really good example of a low-budget, very uncomfortable, gritty sort of horror film done very well. I feel like this movie couldn't commit to one or the other of those things, but I think they have the potential to make something good in the future. I can't say I recommend this movie, but it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, because I've really scraped the bottom of the barrel when it comes to trashy horror movies before. That is my review of Bigfoot Blood Trap. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!